Hello, everybody. Welcome here to the Wine with Jimmy channel. Thank you for stopping by, and welcome to another series here featuring California, focusing for the WSET level 4. That's the diploma. So we are here looking at a multi-series on California, focusing here on series 3, looking at the wonderful Sonoma County. Sonoma County is split into 7 parts. So welcome to the 5th part that's going to look at the coastal part of it. So Sonoma Coast and the newer created AVA of the West Sonoma Coast. As always, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, please do get in touch. You can do so by commenting on this video before. Have you been out to Sonoma, Sonoma Valley, Sonoma Coast? Do you like the wines? What have you tried? Please do get in touch. Okay, without further ado, let's rock and roll. Looking at, first of all, the Sonoma County as a whole. I have covered this in previous videos, but I will go through this again. So we're just shy of 24,000 hectares under vine in the Sonoma County. And of course, this area is fairly large. It borders the Pacific Ocean, which is going to be important specifically for this video. Mendocino County to the north, Lake County, Napa County, and in the south, the San Pablo Bay. We have somewhere around 425 wineries, which are varied from very small all the way up to multinational corporations. We have about 1,800 grape growers here. Now, we focused on other things like overarching AVAs, like Northern Sonoma before. We will focus on Sonoma Valley on a future video, but this one's going to be over one of those major overarching AVAs. That is the Sonoma Coast. So just so we're aware, we're going to focus on Sonoma Coast, but also discuss the new AVA of the West Sonoma Coast, elevated in 2022. Now, the Sonoma County, as we are well aware, focuses on the Burgundian grape varieties. So 50% of what is produced here is Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. But of course, there are important amounts of Cabernet Sauvignon as well, specifically in places like Alexander Valley, for example. Zinfandel too, and Merlot. Zinfandel important in areas like Dry Creek, for example. Okay, so let's discuss first of all our Sonoma Coast AVA, and I've highlighted it here on this map for you. So this is a map of the whole of the Sonoma County. It's been dyed down to just the red color, but I have then highlighted the Sonoma Coast area. So everywhere in yellow, you'll see running all the way from the north, bordering Mendocino, running, of course, all the way along the Sonoma Coast, going all the way down towards the Petaluma Gap and places like Bodega Bay, down to Carneros, the Sonoma part of Carneros, and including the Russian River Valley, which incorporates sub-AVAs of Green Valley and Chalk Hill. So we have quite a large, expansive area for the Sonoma Coast. Also included here is the Petaluma Gap AVA and Fort Ross-Seaview, which sits below Annapolis and to the north of Bodega Bay in that middle section here. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. So we are, of course, defined by a major geographical feature, the coast, therefore being very much affected by the Pacific Ocean here. So vineyards, specifically in the west of this AVA towards the coast, can be within a few miles of the coastline, so therefore are extremely exposed to cold ocean winds and fog. And it is quite specific. Now, if you're in, say, Petaluma or you're in the Russian River, there are still winds and breezes that come through the Pacific in these areas. Of course, the Petaluma Gap is very famous for that. But it's majorly felt here. So if you visit somewhere like Bodega Bay, famous for Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds. It was filmed in that area. You will know when you're there, you've got that real cooling wind. It's chilly, very, very chilly coming from the Pacific. So growing conditions here are, of course, very cool. And there's limited sunshine too because of the fogs that are rolling in from the Pacific and going into specific valleys around this area. I'm going to include the Sonoma Coast map always as a side picture here, side diagram, just so you're constantly aware of the geography, the boundaries of this area. So some distinct things to mention here. Now, we know that there are fogs, we know there is less available sunshine, and we know it's cool with the Pacific influence. So this means that the early ripening varieties of Pinot Noir and Chardonnay dominate, generally producing relatively light-bodied, high acidic styles, typically with a salinity behind them and being medium-bodied. Real great producers here. Aubert is one of them. So you'll see that in the picture to the right-hand side. Steve Kistler's Occidental. Occidental is very, very high. Cobb Winery as well, and many others. Now, we've been discussing the Sonoma Coast AVA. It's time to discuss the newest AVA, elevated in 2022, which is called the West Sonoma Coast. So this is the 19th and newest AVA. This video is filmed in 2023 and it was elevated in May 2022. So it's actually quite a specific area, fairly large as well. So you've got a picture here of the gregarious Carol Kemp, who is one of the protagonists behind forming the West Sonoma Coast AVA. And he was the owner of Redcar and the co-founder of Alma Fria, making fantastic wines in this area. So you'll see that we have I highlighted here a new map that identifies the Pacific Ocean, and we have really the whole western side of the Sonoma Coast, including Fort Ross-Seaview, which sits here in this middle, going down towards Bodega Bay and a part of Occidental as well down in this area. It's kind of actually this red line here is the bordering line that you can see between it. So quite a distinctive area, quite large, and it is within the Sonoma Coast AVA. So what else can we discuss around this? So yes, we have an overarching area. We have 3 subzones, which includes 1 AVA. So Annapolis, which is the northern city towards the Mendocino County line, is a subzone. Fort Ross-Seaview, which sits in the middle of the coast, I showed you on that map earlier, that is an AVA in its own right. And then also Freestone Occidental as well, which sits more towards the southeast of the area. We know that this area is very well known for distinct cool climate wines, dictated by its proximity to the Pacific Ocean. Wonderful picture there showing you once again that West Sonoma Coast looking down towards the likes of Bodega Bay. Okay, so it is cool climate. So from Pinot Noir to Chardonnay and even some Syrah, made in a very Rhone style, northern Rhone style, the West Sonoma wines tend to highlight real bright acidities, pure varietal character, and moderate alcohol levels. We have somewhere near 30 wineries a part of the West Sonoma Coast. And it's about something like 1,000 acres in total, majorly Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, but also some Syrah. So do look out for the likes of Alma Fria that I mentioned, Balletto, Black Kite Cellars, Boar's View, Cobb, Dumont, making excellent wines, Falia wines, Flowers Vineyards and Winery, Hirsch Vineyards, some of the highest altitude within West Sonoma Coast, Littorai, Occidental, like we mentioned, Paul Hobbs, Pied Vineyards up in the north, Rayen Winery, Redcar, and the list goes on. So specific AVAs that I must mention that are found within here as well. So we have the Fort Ross-Seaview AVA, located, remember, in the northwest of the Sonoma Coast and West Sonoma Coast. It's named for Fort Ross, which is a historic outpost of Russian settlers along Highway 1, and also the small community of Seaview along Seaview Road. So that's where Fort Ross, the Russian influence, and Seaview, the location. So to be labelled as Fort Ross-Seaview, the wines must be made from the vineyards within the AVA boundaries, which are over 280 meters in altitude. Most vineyards lie between 280 and 540. This altitude means that the vineyards sit above the fog line, and they gain, therefore, longer hours of sunshine because that fog doesn't need to be blown off by the sunshine. So you basically have vineyards at higher altitudes, more direct UV light, and therefore you get more concentration as a result, or as a possibility. But we still experience coastal winds, so we have a moderating influence on the temperature. So expect wines which have this real good concentration behind them, but also with that kind of minerality, salinity, freshness because of its proximity to the Pacific. Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, of course, with some Syrah here as well. And then in the southern section, located on the map here, you'll see we've highlighted it in orange, is the Petaluma Gap. So this is actually an AVA defined by wind. So we were defining really the West Sonoma Coast due to its proximity to the Pacific, but here it's all about wind. It's a relatively new AVA, and it's located in southern Sonoma County as identified on that map, and also partly in northern Marin County. So we have the area being open to the coast on both ends. So it comes down to the San Pablo Bay in the southern section, and of course the Pacific. It means, therefore, it's actually affected by two types of winds coming from the Pacific, the same, but one coming through the Petaluma Gap and one coming through the San Pablo Bay. So that means that we have very windy conditions. Now, the AVA boundaries were defined according to an area that maintains a persistent wind of at least 8 miles an hour, 8 miles per hour during the growing season. So the winds will lower temperatures, but they are strong enough also to arrest transpiration. And that is because the leaves close their stomata, their little mouths that they find all across the leaves, to protect the leaf and the plant from moisture loss. So that slows respiration and photosynthesis. So this means you have a very gentle ripening of the vines in this land. Pinot Noir is the major grape variety in the Petaluma Gap. So we are looking at about 75% of plantings, then followed by Chardonnay and Syrah. Expect wines with good concentration, high acidities, and often lower alcohol than somewhere like Russian River, for example. It's the Klein family cellars in that picture.
Okay, let's have a look at all things Pacific Coast on Sonoma County, focusing on, of course, the likes of the Sonoma Coast, West Sonoma Coast AVAs, Fort Ross-Seaview, and of course, Petaluma Gap. So let's take a look at Sonoma County, where it lies, of course, and then we're going to look at the all-encompassing Sonoma Coast AVA. Now, the Sonoma Coast AVA is large. It goes from Mendocino County to Marin County and San Pablo Bay. It's very close to the Pacific, as you can see, with cool winds and fogs, which can limit the sun. This is an area for Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, and there are quite low yields due to those winds. Then we find the new AVA of the West Sonoma Coast there in yellow, the 19th AVA of Sonoma County from 2022. And this is much more dictated by the Pacific, so much cooler, and again for Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. Then within the West Sonoma Coast, we do find Fort Ross-Seaview AVA in the northwest part of it. This actually has a rule where it must be from a minimum 280 meters and often up to around 4 to 500 meters altitude. It's above the fog layer, which means it gets a lot more sunlight here. So they're actually quite ripe as a style. And then we come down to the famous Petaluma Gap, which is, as you can see there, located both on the Pacific and the San Pablo Bay. It's therefore actually legally defined by the windy conditions. It must be at least 8 miles per hour during the growing season in terms of the lineated AVA area. And that slows respiration and photosynthesis. This means lower yields, really high acidities here. Pinot Noir is about 75% of the production, topped up with Chardonnay and Syrah.
Okay, thank you very much for joining me looking at the Sonoma Coast and West Sonoma Coast AVAs. Please do join me for part 6, looking at Carneros, that southerly AVA, which goes into Napa Valley, about 40% of it, and also Sonoma County, about 60% as well. So join me for that. If you wish to watch that, you'll need to go across to www.winewithjimmy.com and register to Wine with Jimmy. And you'll get access to all of that exclusive video content, many, many exclusive videos. Any comments again on this video, please do pop it in the comments section. And if you do find yourself in the UK, come and say hello. Come for a class, a glass, or a bottle. I've been Jimmy Smith. Ciao for now. Goodbye.